Hey, what up guys? It's Vel here, and today I am finally bringing you my Stormbrand Inquisitor updated for 3.19. I have been playing this build since Harvest, and I find it my coziest build from Leaguestart to Endgame. Some of you guys may know my Stormbrander as an occultist or a guardian, but after testing out the Inquisitor, I'm sorry Profane Bloom, I love you, but Inevitable Judgment? You're the new bae. What it does is allows our crits to ignore enemy resistances, which effectively doubles the value of our crit by making them also penetrate resists. We're acting as though resistances aren't there, so they can't go below 0 with things like penetration and weakness curses. On the defensive side of the Inquisitor, it gives us an ascendancy that effectively is permanent consecrated ground, and standing on that gives us life and ES regen. Coupled with a Burden of Truth and a Sulfur Flask, it is very regen, which is really nice because we're going to be using all of this regen to counter the downside of Petrified Blood when we wear it later. The playstyle of this build is essentially you just drop some brands and run around. Like, it really is that simple. You can have 3 brands, but each enemy can only have 1 brand attached, and it can also chain to other enemies. I'm going to go into some of the pros and cons, so let's start with the pros. This is a fast League starter because you're not standing still to deal damage. The Inquisitor is going to give you a very smooth power curve throughout the axe, and it doesn't require expensive uniques at first. Pushing into red maps with low gear is possible, provided you can dodge. The cons are it can get expensive to boss with, especially the Giga bosses. Not everybody likes the playstyle. Refreshing brands and running around can annoy them. It's not fully ailment immune. You'll have your freeze immunity and you'll have shock immunity from your Impulsa, but getting ignite immunity or poison is going to require you to craft implicits on your clusters as well as well-crafted boots. Or Corrupted Call of the Brotherhoods, because you can get those with cannot be ignited, cannot be poisoned, corrupted blood cannot be inflicted on you. There's a lot of different options for Corrupted Call of the Brotherhoods. Now into the fun part, the gearing. Let's start off with the helmet. So at first you can wear a very, very basic nothing helmet. You just need some life on it. It's just going to be a rare helmet with some life, some resist, life regen if you can swing it. Later on, when you're going up to your mid to end game, you're going to want to find yourself a Crown of the Inward Eye. Now, this one I have on has increased effective shock. That was a really nice corrupt for me. It was a YOLO corrupt, but generally you don't need one with a YOLO corrupt. You can have one without it. You can have either zealotry on it or determination for the reservation efficiency. Fortunately, these helmets are relatively cheap. They come up pretty early, and you don't really need this until like late red maps, so it's fine. Later on, for the absolute Chad play, you can get yourself a Blizzard Crown and make it look something like this, where it has, in my case, I got really lucky with the life regen per second, but I did put a mana reservation elevated Redeemer mod, and the nearby enemies take 9% increased elemental damage from the elevated Shaper mod. Next, we're going to move on to the Impulsa. Now, to me, an Impulsa is a no-brainer. This is a life build. It gives effective shock. It gives more damage if you shocked an enemy recently, and shocked enemies explode. Plus, you're unaffected by shock, so like everything about this is great. It's also a really good corrupt target or double corrupt target, and now that they've added back tainted currency into the game with beyond mobs, linking a corrupted chest piece or socketing it should be so much nicer. So you can actually take the Impulses and see if you can get yourself plus to AoE or etc. A plus to AoE would be great on it. Because we're a Stormbrand, we can also have plus to duration. Those are both viable options for us. Ideally on an Impulsa, you'd want a plus to AoE and plus to duration, but those are like very expensive, and I mean, I haven't had one of those in a long time myself. Now for the rings. So one of your rings is always going to be a Call of the Brotherhood. Just always a Call of the Brotherhood. Now, I have a lot of variations of Calls of the Brotherhood because you can get these with a lot of different corrupts on them to make your life a lot easier. If you don't want to struggle with getting that Ignite immune, you can get a Call of the Brotherhood with Cannot Be Ignited. I still think, even with the change in the drops of unique, Call of the Brotherhood is not going to be a difficult unique to get because there is that 2-stone card set that you can farm. So I don't see any real issue there. And you know what? We have this Call of the Brotherhood, and let's just corrupt it. And it did nothing like most of my corrupts this league. For the other ring, we basically just want, again, big life, big resist. So in this case, because it was the lovely recombination league, I ended up making myself a ring something like this. But I'm going to be completely honest with you here. I don't think it had to be that difficult. I don't think I needed to add a fractured mod. I think I could have just got a cogwork ring and a bunch of global critical strike multiplier and just kept slamming it, because that's how I got the fire and the elemental resist, is just slamming the global critical strike multiplier essence again and again. It's this essence. I actually use this essence quite a bit this league. It's the deafening essence of loathing. And then I locked my suffixes and slammed on life with veiled chaos. And that's how I made that ring. But you don't have to go that hard on the ring. Like, I was wearing this ring for a stupid amount of time. I was wearing this ring heavily into doing conquerors and twisteds and stuff with it. I mean, oh, I should probably change my ring eventually. So that's what I did. So let's go on to the amulet. This is actually something I'm super, super excited about for this new league, because the amulet, ideally, you want +1 to all skill gems and +1 to lightning skill gems to get the most damage out of your Storm brand. And of course, crit and dexterity, because dexterity is definitely going to be a requirement on a couple pieces of gear for you. So I made this league, but I'm just thinking, with the new league coming out, it's going to be so nice to be able to get a +2 to lightning and not have to worry about it. So this was the amulet I ended up wearing while I killed Uber Cirrus. However, I wore this amulet for also a insanely long amount of time. It was a solid amulet. It gave me all the dexterity I needed. It had a lot of life on it, +1 to lightning skills. I do get a little more damage by doing the +1 to all skill gems, because that includes the auras, but definitely this is what you're looking for on an amulet. So the Burden of Truth is a no-brainer for us. This item was added in 3.18, and it splits the incoming hit damage between our life and our ES. Since we have both high regen for life and ES, plus life leech, plus ES leech, it's not hard to sustain both pools, and the belt gives an awesome keystone called Supreme Decadence, which allows our life flask to regen ES as well. So I can't pick a better belt. I don't even want to corrupt it, because 96 to max ES is really good for us. For boots, we actually have a couple options, which is pretty nice. You're probably going to start out with boots that just have some basic life, maybe some life regen, some res, and some move speed, whether you can craft it on or not. And then you always want to make sure that you get yourself the 1 to 120 lightning damage if you haven't killed recently. I know normally people go for the penetration if you haven't killed recently, but because we're an Inquisitor, we don't need that. So this is massive damage for us. There are 2 ways that you can make boots for this character. I ended up doing a more expensive way, where I have elevated Tailwind and elevated Avoid Elemental Ailments. The Elemental Ailments comes from a Shaper elevation, and the Tailwind comes from Hunter. I also managed to craft on some other movement speed and got a little bit more res on these boots. Again, the 1 to 160 lightning damage if you haven't killed recently. However, there is another way to craft these ailment avoidance boots, which would actually give you about 15% increased ailments, but you would lose the tailwind. And that is by using this deafening essence of loathing. You've heard me talk about it before. I'm mentioning it again. On boots, it gives 31 to 35% chance to avoid elemental ailments. That, coupled with an Eater of Worlds implicit that does more avoid ailments, and you can get an Exarch which avoids ignite. You can get your full ignite ailment avoidance that way. It really depends on which way you want to craft the boots, whether or not the speed is more important to you, or you want your max avoidance that way instead of going for trying to get it on your cluster jewels. For the gloves, it's pretty simple. You just want to find Temple Mod gloves with increased damage with hits against chilled enemies, some life, and some life regen. If it has another res, awesome, because that means you can put on damage while leeching, which is just more damage for the gloves. And you're going to want to put on the hinder enemies on hit with spells and the unnerve implicits, because that's just more defense and more damage. So on to the weapons. The wands, you ideally want +1 to all spell skill gems and +1 to all lightning spell skill gems. My current wands both generally look like this. This was of 3.18. These are my profane wands. One of them has crit chance for spells, one of them has global crit multiplier, and they're both multi-modded because you know what? Those things are more than enough for me. However, I was in T16s killing Cirrus and so on with this wand and one of these two. So it's not necessary to have both wands with all spell skill gems, but the more all spell skills, the more lightning the more +1s, the more damage. For our large cluster, we want an 8 passive that has Doriani's Lesson, Snowstorm, and Thunderstruck. Doriani's Lesson is the key one here because it gives us life leech with elemental damage and just some more elemental damage on top of that. So if it's a little expensive at the beginning of the league, you could just lose Thunderstruck. It's a knockback. It's really nice defensively, and just take the other two at first. For our medium cluster jewels, we need 2 4 to 5 passive clusters with Basics of Pain and Pressure Points. It basically gives us big crit and damage. So until you get your Flesh and Flame combo, I'm going to suggest getting a 2 passive Enduring Composure just to give you easy endurance charges. After you get the Flesh and Flame, you can add in Fettle for more life, and both of the small cluster jewels are a great way to get big res, big dexterity. Again, this build does have some dex requirements, so understandably, wherever you can get it, it's good. The Flesh and Flame I choose for this build is Harmony of Purpose, the Guardian Ascendancy, because not only does it give us charges of power, frenzy, and endurance, but it also means that enemies can't steal the charges from us, which that map mod becomes completely negated. I ended up grabbing myself an Imbalanced Guard Possible Escape, so I can grab myself more defenses for the Giga Bosses. To be honest, it wasn't needed for all the Giga Bosses, but it was nice to have that extra 1% max to all elemental resistances, as well as the 2% max to all elemental resistances. These are just very, very comfortable. I also have a 5% chance to deal double damage in here, but really this node is only for the double damage. It doesn't have to be here. It is a nice layer of defense if you can afford it. When it comes to the Watcher's Eye, get the Consecrated Ground created by Zealotry. It causes enemies to take 9% increased damage. This is the first one I get. And then the second one, you can look for Precision Crit Multi. That's really good for damage. If you have a lot of money, you can even go for a third mod. Or if you want, there are choices that you can get for both Determination and Vitality to give you even more regen or more armor or reduction in critical strikes. So there's a lot of options for that, but my first and foremost is the Consecrated Ground you create while affected by Zealotry will cause enemies to take 9% increased damage. There are a couple things to mention for the pinnacle bosses when doing this build. For Cirrus, you're absolutely going to want a health flask. Depending on your dodging ability, maybe even 2 health flasks to be safe. If you have the Divine Judgment nodes, you're going to want to take those out so you can put the points into Asylum, and you're going to want to get the mastery for Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. Or you can get a Corrupted Call of the Brotherhood with Corrupted Blood cannot be inflicted on you. However you do it, you gotta have that Corrupted Blood because it's bad. It's very bad. For Shaper, for Giga Elder, and for Maven, all these bosses really just need is a cold flask, maybe something like this. I know that you're not gonna have the 7 charges. It's gonna be 3 now. That's still completely acceptable for us. I will mention though, with Maven, for her Cascade of Pain, you're going to want to move to the other side of the arena from where she's at and go in between the triangle of the Cascade of Pain. You can try to get behind her if you want, but it's pretty dangerous, and it's much easier to just sit in between those cascade of panes. Like, don't be nervous. You can just hit the sapphire flask and go in between. Uber Cortex, actually a joke. I've never had an issue with him. I've done him with minus 24 elemental penetration. I've done it with like extra crit, extra like 400%, like so many things. He's easy for us. Not even concerned a little bit. Uber Eater, all you need is a lightning flask. Again, looking something like this. And you want your sound on so you can hear what he's saying to you. And last but not least, Uber Exarch, which for this you want a good fire flask and to make sure to dodge his moves and his balls. I think the hardest thing about all pinnacle bosses is actually just making sure that you dodge at the correct time and listen to sounds. Thank you guys so much for watching my Stormbrand guide video. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Maybe leave a comment for the algorithm. Let me know. Are you enjoying Stormbrand? Are you going to be playing Stormbrand? Have you played it in the past? Has this video convinced you? Definitely leave a comment below, and I will see you guys on Leaguestart. Bye, guys.